If I ask you, what Pokemon do you think is the strongest legendary ever created? There's a good chance a lot of you immediately think of Groudon. So when Pokemon Scarlet came out and fans saw that Game Freak yet again gave its brand new legendary Pokemon not only Groudon's insanely powerful ability, but two incredibly strong abilities bundled into one, or as one, everyone rightfully expected this Pokemon to be absolutely broken. But that wasn't the case at all. In fact, Koraidon had been so underwhelming that its best result at an official tournament once it finally became legal for the first time was a top 8 finish, which it managed only twice. On the other hand, Koraidon's future counterpart outright won multiple official tournaments, including even the World Championship. But after Worlds, the bike duo returned to their time machine, giving players a 4-month break without any restricted legendaries. Until Pokemon shocked us all, as players have now been given a second chance with Koraidon, as Regulation G has surprisingly returned yet again. Where, just a few weeks ago, we witnessed a different legend take Koraidon to its first ever first place finish at Europe's most important tournament of the year.
Wolfglick is able to take the title. He takes his second international championship and becomes your 2025 European International Champion.
So what did players get so wrong about Koraidon during the first stint with Regulation G, and what is it that's made it suddenly have much more success this second go-around? Well, in order to understand exactly why Koraidon had originally been such a letdown, let's take a quick step back and go through what, in theory, made a lot of people believe that Koraidon was bound to be a top-tier Pokemon before it ever even became legal. And there's no better place to start than what I alluded to at the beginning of the video. Its ability. Or should I say abilities, because just like Calyrex before it, Koraidon has two abilities combined into one, Orichalcum Pulse. The first part of the ability is exactly the same as Groudon's Drought ability, which sets up the harsh sunlight weather effect for 5 turns. The second is the ability exclusive to the Paradox Pokemon, Photosynthesis. Well, kind of. You see, whenever the harsh sunlight is active, Photosynthesis boosts that Pokemon's highest stat. But Koraidon's version, Orichalcum Pulse, boosts only its attack, which is a stat you'd usually want to be boosting anyway. Now, the harsh sunlight is a very abusable weather effect, especially by those same, also newly introduced in Scarlet and Violet, past Paradox Pokemon. The past Paradox Pokemon were widely considered to be superior to their future counterparts, so being able to give what are already high-statted strong Pokemon an automatic boost to one of their stats seems like it would be broken. And well, it kind of is. Fluttermane and Raging Bolt were already two of the strongest Pokemon in the game, even on their own merit, outside of the harsh sunlight. And even aside from the past Paradox Pokemon, strong Fire-type attackers like Chi-Yu can also take advantage of the sun, and its ability even allows Fluttermane and Raging Bolt to do way more damage. But notice how I haven't mentioned a certain Pokemon's name as one of these sunlight abusers. And that's because Koraidon itself isn't a great Pokemon at abusing the sun. It's not a fire type to take advantage of the harsh sunlight offensively the way, say, Kyogre can take advantage of its weather, and it can't take advantage defensively either, like how Groudon loses its water weakness in the sun. And while Koraidon can learn fire-type moves, the only strong, reliable, physical fire-type move it learns is Flare Blitz. But Flare Blitz comes with a downside, an immense amount of recoil damage. And this is probably when I should mention that the official competitive Pokemon rules at the moment allow for only one restricted legendary on a team. So whichever one you choose for your team, it needs to be in the driver's seat. Think of it as a team captain that puts on the BGs in the locker room before a game because it really needs to be staying alive to give you any chance of winning. And Flare Blitz certainly doesn't help Koraidon's longevity. But you know what else doesn't help? It's typing. We've seen Kommo-o, who has the exact same typing, be a really successful Pokemon for years. Dragon and Fighting has 7 resistances, of which all but Bug are really useful types to resist. The trade-off though is that it comes with 5 weaknesses, one of which is even a 4 times weakness. The problem is that among its 4 regular weaknesses, Psychic, Ice, and Dragon are especially important, because far and away the 3 best and most used restricted legendaries are Calyrex Shadow Rider, Calyrex Ice Rider, and Miraidon. Meaning all 3 can easily knock it out in a single hit. But Ray, that's okay. Calyrex Shadow Rider has 2 4 times weaknesses and it's still really good. And this is the generation of terrestrialization. We can just change Koraidon's type to whatever we want. And that's all true. Terapagos is actually pretty similar in that it's another restricted legendary that pretty much has to terastallize every game or else you're at a serious disadvantage, and that hasn't stopped it from being good. So the question becomes, even knowing that Koraidon is a Terahog, is it worth it over using any of the other restricted legendaries? Because it means you'll have to build the rest of your team in a way where your other 5 Pokemon can't really expect to ever terastallize. Well, let's take a look at Koraidon's stats and moves. Its 2 standout stats are its speed and attack. With a speed stat matching that of Fluttermane, Xianpao, and Koraidon, it's clearly one of the fastest Pokemon in the entire game. Its attack, while is tied for its best stat, isn't actually all that insane for a restricted legendary. Calyrex Ice Rider, Groudon, and even Zacian post-nerf all have significantly higher attack stats. And non-restricted legendaries like Landorus Therian, Ursaluna, and Iron Hands do as well. But just the attack stat isn't everything. Pokemon like Dragonite and Urshifu have a lower attack stat, yet are capable of doing insane amounts of damage. This is where the moves a Pokemon learns matters, and spoiler alert, this may be Koraidon's biggest weakness. Its signature move, Collision Course, is a really strong and reliable fighting type move. Unlike the slightly stronger Close Combat, there's no drawback to using Collision Course, which is great when, like I said before, you really want your restricted legendary to stay alive as long as possible. Collision Course even has the added benefit where if it hits a Pokemon for super effective damage, that damage increases by an additional 33%. Not even the bulkiest of Incineroars can take that hit. But here's the problem. If it's not a super effective hit, 100 base power is a solid amount of damage, but that's all it is. It's just a solid move that isn't anywhere close to strong enough to one-hit KO Pokemon when they're still relatively healthy. Especially because just the mere fact that Incineroar exists and is used on such a high percentage of teams, physical attacking restricted legendaries are almost forced to use their held item slot on the Clear Amulet, just to protect their attack stat from being lowered. That means no held item to increase their damage, and no held item to increase their longevity either. Now, there is one move that can threaten one-hit KOs on Pokemon at or near full HP, but at a steep cost. Yep, it's Flare Blitz. Being a 120 base power move makes it one of the strongest moves in the game, and since it's also a fire type move, it gets a 50% power boost from the harsh sunlight. Pair that with a fire Terra type, and this move can eliminate bulky Pokemon that aren't even weak to fire in one hit. But we already went over this. The recoil damage Koraidon's going to take in return means it's not going to be on the battlefield for very long after either. And trading your Terastallization and your restricted legendary just for a single KO usually isn't worth it. What is worth it is hitting that subscribe button. Anyway, Fire and Fighting does make a really good combination offensively though, as no single type in the game resists them both. This makes it so Koraidon really has no need for a Dragon type move. Not that it learns any good ones anyway. Its strongest reliable physical Dragon type move is Dragon Claw, which is just mediocre. So in terms of setup moves to fill out its moveset, Flame Charge is nice as it does decent damage in the sun and with Terra Fire, while also boosting its speed to outpace the likes of Calyrex Shadow Rider and any Choice Scarf Pokemon. And Swords Dance can double its attack stat, to the point where Collision Course actually is able to one-hit KO Pokemon. But when you compare it to other physical attacking restricted legendaries, well, Zacian gets an attack boost just by entering battle, and Calyrex Ice Rider can boost its attack while actually attacking and doing damage. Not to mention, its form of speed control, Trick Room, doesn't only benefit itself, but your entire team as well. And speaking of Calyrex Ice Rider, it represents perfectly what Koraidon lacks. And it's actually something that almost every other good restricted legendary has. It's the one thing about its move pool that made me call it Koraidon's biggest weakness. Calyrex Ice Rider, Calyrex Shadow Rider, Terapagos, Miraidon, Kyogre, Groudon. What do all of these restricted legendaries have in common? Well, they can all damage both opponents at the same time with a singular spread move. Glacial Lance, Astral Barrage, Terra Starstorm, Water Spout, Origin Pulse, Precipice Blades. Not only are all of these stronger than Koraidon's signature move Collision Course, but they're stronger and hit both of the opponent's Pokemon. That makes these Pokemon, even ignoring their stats, just capable of way more damage. Koraidon's future counterpart Miraidon has also proven the sheer value of spread damage, as it relies on Dazzling Gleam, which isn't really the strongest move, and Miraidon isn't even a fairy type. But with Terra Fairy, Choice Specs, and its Hadron engine active, it becomes a terrifying move that's difficult for opponents to play around. It just makes playing the game so much easier, because you don't have to guess if the opponent is going to switch out to something that resists your attack, or try and call what turn and with which Pokemon they'll use Protect. You could honestly probably give a monkey this drifting Joy-Con and it could somehow win games with how broken some of these spread moves are. And monkeys aren't the only animal that has it easy in the restricted legendary kingdom, cause there's a singular Route 1 bird that completely shuts down Koraidon with ease. And this Route 1 bird isn't even some niche pick. The last time we played Regulation G, it won the North American International Championship and finished runner-up at the World Championship. I'm of course talking about Pelipper, who's a legit top tier pick even if no one uses Koraidon or Groudon. Not only can it overwrite the harsh sunlight with its Drizzle ability, but it can switch in at will against Koraidon, resisting both fire and fighting type attacks. The fact that such a common non-legendary can shut it down so easily definitely factors into players not even wanting to bring Koraidon to events. But while few and far between, Koraidon had seen some success the last time we played Regulation G. When we look at the most successful Koraidon teams from the first Regulation G format, there are 3 Pokemon that appear on every single one. And it's the 3 Sun Abusers we already covered: Watermane, Raging Bolt, and Chi-Yu. And these 3 make total sense. So you're left trying to solve poor matchups like against Tailwind teams, Trick Room teams, or any team with Pelipper for that matter, using just 2 Pokemon. But that's a tall ask, especially when the 2 teams that met in the finals this past Worlds featured all of those problematic matchups. But what if the team isn't so hyper-offensive? What if it isn't so all-in on Sun, where Koraidon doesn't have to be some F1 star? Well, that's exactly what Andrew Figueres was thinking at the San Antonio Regional Championship in January, where he took Koraidon to a 4th place finish, its highest ever at the time. Instead of an offensive approach featuring the usual suspects of Life Orb Raging Bolt, Choice Specs Watermane, or a Glass Cannon Chi-Yu, he ran an Assault Vest Raging Bolt, Focus Sash Watermane, and the much bulkier fire type Entei. He even had the incredibly tanky Umbreon, which is not only a phenomenal defensive pick for both Calyrex forms, but also threatening to them offensively. What was also very unique at the time was his decision not to use the Clear Amulet on Koraidon, instead going with Scale Shot paired with the loaded dice. See, when you have a team where most of your other Pokemon don't really care about Incineroar, and you have a Pokemon that can one-hit KO it through Intimidate anyway, you don't actually need the Clear Amulet. But Wolf Glick took Koraidon Innovation one massive step further. When you look back at Koraidon's best results during the first installment of Regulation G, there's actually one Pokemon on a couple of those teams that I haven't yet talked about: Gothitelle. See, Shadow Tag lets you trap vulnerable Pokemon, KOing them while they can't switch. So imagine a Pelipper you've trapped on the field after setting the sun up. It would love to switch out to reset its Rain Summoning Drizzle ability, but instead, it just becomes a sitting duck. And one of the best moves to pair with Shadow Tag is another classic Wolf strategy: Perish Song. And the best user of Perish Song just so happens to be a past Paradox Pokemon. But it doesn't stop there. Wolf went even further with the realization that Hyper Offense may not be the best way to use Koraidon like most players originally thought. Amoonguss and Incineroar make a great defensive backbone, where not only do they work well with the Perish Trap strategy, but they also help keep Koraidon alive longer thanks to being the 2 best support Pokemon in the game. And I already talked at great length about just how valuable it is to keep your restricted legendary alive as long as possible, which may seem counterintuitive to Wolf's held item choice for his Koraidon: Life Orb. See, similar to the loaded dice Koraidon that made it to the top 4 a month prior, Wolf realized that Clear Amulet may not be as necessary as players thought. I also mentioned how Koraidon isn't really great at threatening one-hit KOs with any of its moves aside from Flare Blitz. Well, Close Combat is 20% stronger than Collision Course, and if you add the Life Orb to it, it's absolutely threatening one-hit KOs on most Pokemon. But of course, it comes with the downside of lowering your defenses. But when you can support Koraidon with moves like Fake Out and Rage Powder to prevent the opponent from actually hitting it with an attack, or have Pokemon like Amoonguss and Incineroar that are fully capable of switching in for Koraidon in order to reset those defense drops, you've subtly removed a lot of the downside of this move and item combination. Hyper Offense Pokemon like Watermane, Chi-Yu, and Ogerpon Cornerstone are not Pokemon that can switch in very easily. In addition to all that, Perish Trap actually benefits to a great degree from taking KOs, even if it's a 1-for-1 trade. So if Koraidon goes for a Flare Blitz or Close Combat to one-hit KO something, but gets KO'd in return thanks to all the recoil damage or defense drops, That just makes it easier for Wolf to clean up in the endgame with Perish Song. I think we've only begun to scratch the surface of what Koraidon teams are fully capable of in these restricted legendary formats. But it's really exciting that players have finally started to experiment with new ways to use it and have found a lot of success already by doing just that. So is Koraidon's early success in 2025 just the beginning? Or will it return to the shadow of its futuristic counterpart? Only time will tell.